Hello, everyone, and welcome back to LTUE 39. This hour we have the panel Am I Doing Something Stupid? Our panelists for the hour are Els Curtis, M.A. Nichols, and Mike Thayer. As a reminder, we will be having a Q&A time at the end of this panel, so feel free to ask any questions you have in the Discord. With that out of the way, I shall turn things over to our moderator for the hour, Jessica Guernsey.
I'm a little offended you didn't call me like the fearless moderator or the esteemed moderator. Lovely. I would have accepted. Anyway, thanks to everyone for coming. This is the last panel of LTUE, and I've been looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We have some excellent panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves after I introduce myself. I'm Jessica Guernsey. I am a slush pile reader, which basically means I am the crusher of your dreams. And I also write short fiction. So in mostly science fiction and fantasy genres, but a little bit of historical. So I'm going to have Els introduce herself.
Okay, I'm Els Curtis. I've written middle grade. This is my book, Thrice Cursed, Thrice Blessed. I've also written a novella about a satire about the witch trials back in Boston, Massachusetts. I also write comics. I have a comic out called Lenses. It's right here. And I'm currently working on another middle grade fantasy as well as a webcomic.
You are very busy. And Melanie, you're next.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Melanie Nichols. I publish under my initials, M.A. Nichols, and I am an indie author. Started publishing in 2016. I started off in young adult urban fantasy, then branched out into fairy tale retellings. But what I'm really known for and what I mostly focus on now is historical romance.
Nice. And Mike, what you got?
I am Mike Thayer. I write this series called The Epic Adventures of the Techno Wizard, about a kid who gets transported to a different world but still has cell phone signal back to Earth. So a couple of those books are Whitney Award finalists, which is pretty cool. And then in June, I'm coming out. I just have a printout of the cover, which is kind of ghetto, but The Double Life of Danny Day. So those are self-published. The Double Life of Danny Day is coming out from Macmillan, and that comes out in June. By day, I am an engineer, and I got 3 kids. So there you go.
Nice. My son has your book, by the way. So
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a geek out moment.
I already like your son.
He's a pretty cool kid. You might see him. They like to interrupt.
Very nice.
All right. So the topic of the panel is, am I doing something stupid? And I think we can safely say the answer is probably yes. But in regards to rereading your manuscript, there's lots of different elements to just what you're doing that might be stupid and maybe which is actually not so stupid. Okay. Let us pretend that I just finished my brand new draft and I love it. It's part of my soul. But then I started rereading it and I realized the whole thing is horrible and it's awful and my mother will disown me. So I'm just going to delete it all. Is that stupid?
Yes.
Thank you. Elaborate.
You don't delete it.
Yeah. First off, I'd say, never delete anything. Save. That's the point of digital files. You can save and save and save. I still have the first 8 or 9 drafts of my first book saved on a hard drive somewhere, just because, why delete them? It is really, really hard to judge your work accurately at times, and especially when that inner critic is telling you that something is absolute crap and to give up. That's usually not a realistic voice. That's not a good voice to listen to. But don't give up. No. don't delete, don't give up. That just no.
Yeah, if the question is, should you abandon or completely rewrite, the answer might be yes. I don't think you should delete, but should I just start all the way over? Maybe. They
Yeah.
say your first million words are garbage, and you gotta get them out of your system. And it's not like your next million words are all gold either. By the way, there's a second half of that, where it's not like, yeah, once you get the million words out, then you're fantastic. I think it's true. I think your first million words kind of are garbage, and you do need to get them out of your system. But kind of depends on how you write. And every time I've written, my process has been different, which has surprised me. I thought like, hey, I've written 3 books in a series now. I wrote a book that's unpublished before these, and then I've written, The Double Life of Danny Day, and I'm working on another one. And I do have a process, and I am kind of I do use a 7-point plot structure. I do all these things to make sure my pacing's right, but the process is different every single time. And I know some people probably get through their first draft and they're probably like, man, this is really bad. And it might be. Some people don't write very clean first drafts, and I think you have to revise your way to a great book. Maybe there are people out there that can write a super duper clean first draft. More power to them. That is not me. But yeah, sometimes you do look at your work and it makes you cringe. And that's a tough thing sometimes, is to look at that and be like, this is a diamond in the rough. There's some really good story buried in here. Because just like any other art, when you write, you kind of feel like you're bearing a bit of your soul. So it's not like, oh, I don't know. I can create a lot of different things and feel like it's not a reflection of who I am. But when you write, like, those are your thoughts. That's your feelings. That's your heart. And when you open it up and you're like, I finally did it. I finally put it on the page. And then you reread it and you're like, I'm a horrible person. And it's not just my writing is horrible, it's I'm horrible. But I would say, yes, you've probably done something stupid, but don't let that sort of define you. Just realize that we all do very, very stupid things. And allowing yourself to do stupid stuff, I think, is the first step to being a great writer.
And not being afraid of that. Yeah. Everyone's going to make mistakes. And trying to revive a bad book can teach you a lot of things. And frankly, there does come a time when it's time to throw it out and start over again. But at the same time, that process of fighting through and trying to polish that turd,
I agree.
Can teach you a ton. And honestly, that's how I learned how to write, was polishing my first book over and over again, then throwing it out, rewriting it, then polishing it over and over again, then throwing it out, rewriting it. And that was my education in writing, was just doing it over and over and over again. And the point where I feel like it's the stupid moment is either not finishing the book ever, like never reaching a point where you don't finally say, maybe it is time to work to give up, or giving up too soon. There's a fine balance there, and either one can be bad, but you kind of have to figure out what works for you. And for me, I needed to work through all of that stuff, and it was a good thing for me. It isn't necessarily always for everyone else.
Awesome. I will say really quick, we are getting a little bit of an echo. So if you are not actively talking, would you please mute? And Els, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I did. It is always easier to remodel than to tear down and rebuild. And even if it does sound like trash, there is gold in there. You got to dig for the gold nuggets and find them, because you probably did something amazing somewhere in that book. Keep it. And I agree with the whole, your first million words are terrible. My first million words are terrible, which is why I started out writing fan fiction. I think that fan fiction is really good for beginning readers, because it's just fun. You don't have to worry about certain elements, such as creating characters, creating world building. You can just focus on plot and development and voice. Yeah.
Okay, now I will say, I am a municipal liaison for National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, and every year I get this is crap, this is awful, I just want to delete it and just start over. And I will tell them, or I'll tell you what I tell them: you have earned those words, don't delete them. Maybe put them in a cuts folder and review them at another time. But like Mike said earlier, chances are you've got good stuff. You don't want to scrap it all just because someone needs to give you a hug and maybe a Snickers bar. All right, so let's move on from talking about deleting entire manuscripts. Okay, so I am hysterical. I am probably the funniest person I know. Okay, seriously, I am really funny. But my writing is not funny. So what am I doing that makes me sound stupid? Or how do I know how to fix the funny in my draft?
That's a great question. I think part of it is identifying, number one is beta reader feedback, I think is really big, because number one, I think you have to be your own best audience. If you're not, then I don't really know why you're writing in the first place. So there is a line you have to walk between writing something that you love and being self-indulgent. Because I think if it crosses over into self-indulgence, then that's where you kind of lose people, I think. But that said, I think when you're true to the things that you love, to the things that you find funny, other people, it's going to come through, right? Like none of our humor is so unique that no one else can appreciate it. It might be niche, right? You might have something that maybe isn't widely appreciated, but you're going to have something that somebody appreciates. And so, for me, there's like a couple of things that trump everything in my book, and it's awesome moments and funny moments. So like when I am thinking through a book and I'm drafting it, if a super funny joke pops in my head, I was like, I'm going to find a way to make sure that joke gets in this book, and I will engineer it so that it happens. And hopefully it's seamless and it doesn't feel like it's bolted on, or something that's super duper awesome, an awesome set piece or an awesome moment or an awesome battle or an awesome line or something. And I'll make sure that those all kind of fit into the book. But that's like one of my biggest, when I go back and revise and reread, I make sure, am I leaving any really good joke on the table? Have I not put it in here? Like that's something that's very important to me. And so number one is just trying to see where a joke could be. And for me, a lot of the times jokes are, if I've written a cliche, that's a great opportunity to subvert the cliche and make a joke. So I like it when I find cliches in my work. So I'm like, oh, that's total cliche. I'm going to subvert it, right? Like I was listening to the last panel. A couple of people in my writers group were on this last panel, and they're talking about Terry Pratchett. And Terry Pratchett has this line, something like, teach a man how to make a fire and you warm him for a while, set a man on fire and you warm him for the rest of his life. And that's funny because it subverts the whole teach a man how to fish. And so I think when you start with cliches, it's an awesome opportunity for a joke if you flip it on its head. But yeah, as far as like whether your jokes are actually funny and maybe you think they're funny and other people don't, I promise you other people don't, because you're going to find someone who doesn't think you're funny. But you got to find someone who doesn't owe you a laugh and see if they laugh. Your mom's going to think you're funny, right? But you got to find those beta readers who don't really owe you glowing feedback and then see what that feedback is, I think is really important. So those first sets of beta readers, really, really important beta readers are just absolutely vital.
I think it also depends on the kind of humor you write. I think I'm a humorous writer because I love putting humor in my stories, and my novella, Trial in Name Only, about the witch trials, I used a lot of dark humor. In fact, my writing style is very much like Terry Pratchett's in that book. And occasionally I had to go and find someone and be like, hey, is this funny? Or did I go too far? So having someone bounce your ideas off of is great, because sometimes you can't choose your beta readers and figure out what kind of humor they like and gear it towards the people who will understand your humor. Because in my beta reading, I had a lot of people be like, is this supposed to be funny? And they read more and they're like, oh, it's supposed to be funny. Oh, ho, ho. So you have, I would suggest reading humorous books, specifically your humor, and find the beats, because humor is all about getting the beats, getting the punchline, and sometimes even being subtle about it, because if you have a running joke throughout your entire story, then you need to have it subtle at the beginning and then come down really hard on the end.
I'd say something else to think about as well is that sometimes you're forcing a genre or forcing a subgenre that may not be your writing style. I'm going to say that if you're trying to write a comedy and it's just not working, maybe you're in the wrong genre. Maybe you need to try something else. The style of books that I write have really little to do with my own life. Um, I mean, I'm a romance writer who I am single and I've never actually been on a second date. So yet somehow I'm able to write romance and it really works with me, and I'm able to find work. I found a genre that works for me, and I started off thinking I'm going to do fantasy. I really want to do young adult fantasy. I did dabble, like I said, in fairy tale retellings. I thought these are the things for me, and then I, on a lark, decided to write a historical romance because I'm an eclectic reader. I knew I wanted to go down that route at some point, but it wasn't on the table at that point. But I decided to try it, and I wrote a book and then decided to put it out there because why not? I had a hole in my publishing schedule and went for it. And I basically found the genre I am supposed to be in. That my writing career has completely changed since I took that pivot. And it wasn't that my other books were bad per se. It's just this is the genre I really am better at. And so sometimes if things are just not working, maybe it's you may like comedy books, you may like reading lots of humor, but enjoying something and being able to mimic yourself doesn't necessarily go together. That there's plenty of things that I love and I cannot write. I love Brandon Sanderson, but I will never be able to write books like him. It just doesn't work with me. And so that's something else to keep in mind. Maybe try something else.
Okay. I will say for the record, Mike, my mom thinks I'm hilarious. Okay.
I know, they always do.
Also, going along with something funny, I can't remember which author it was. I want to say it was either Shannon Hale or Jessica Day George, says that whenever she writes a book, she has a friend who has the driest, most monotone delivery system ever, and she has him read the manuscript out loud to her. And if she still thinks it's funny the way he reads it, then she knows it worked. So reading out loud is also, or having someone read it to you is another cool way that I've heard also. All right. Let's talk about cliches. Cliches are not funny. They are stupid. So let's talk about what you do to either avoid cliches or how you make cliches work for you.
Yeah, for me, it's just as I said, I love finding cliches. I don't purposely try to, but I love finding cliches in my work because it is the ripest opportunity for a joke. Sometimes people are like, I don't necessarily I don't know how to be clever. It's like, we'll just start with a cliche. It's the easiest place to start trying to write something funny. Is you take a cliche and you're like, okay, how can I understand this? Okay, this cliche is maybe a figure of speech. How can I understand it literally? Or willfully misinterpret it, or how would this certain character maybe misinterpret this cliche, and then you can use it for a joke. So that's where I run into cliches all the time. I think we all do. I think we have probably way more than we think we do in our work. And so that for me is, when you find those, that's a gift. But you've got to be willing to subvert them and to mess with them. Because I think sometimes we put them in our work because we think they're cool because we've seen them other places, and then we just fall into the trap that these are cliches. So, but when other people identify them, when you have people identify them, like, have beta readers point these out. If you've got some really keen beta readers, have them point out where they're running into cliches or where you're using a trope, or and then kind of mark those and then try really, really hard to subvert those. And then I think you're going to come up with something pretty clever and funny, because people think it's they're going to start reading it. Oh, okay, I know how this goes. And then you flip it on them and they're going to be like, oh, okay. Now this person is self-aware. And you might not have been self-aware when you originally wrote it, but you're definitely self-aware when you go back and revise it and you change it. And it makes you just end up looking way more clever than you probably are, which is what I try to do as an author. I try to trick people into thinking that I'm clever by spending a super long time on a manuscript. So
having characters call out on cliches for themselves. You know, like, I'm being tied to the railroad tracks and this villain is like twirling his mustache. Really? Way to fall into that cliche, guy. I find that fun because, like, sometimes we call ourselves out on being a cliche. Be like, oh, I acted like the dumb blonde today, or something. So having a self-awareness of the characters makes it so that it seems more purposeful rather than accidental cliche. And then you can also add more humor in it and be like, quit being such a cliche as we run away from the scary men into the basement with all the sharp objects.
You know, and honestly, for me, I love taking tropes that I hate, and specifically so I can take the cliches that I, as a reader, dislike, and finding something to do with them that I do like, and taking them and twisting them and have something else happen because, you know, I mean, as readers, we all have things that we hate in our genre, and so I honestly often will take those things I hate and then think, okay, well, how would I make this in a way that I would like this? To, you know, following the formula, twisting it just enough that I'm not irritated and angry that the author is taking me through this journey with them.
Okay, now you need to give an example, Melanie, because I love that. How do you make it work?
The prime example I can think of is I love a spinster heroine, you know, someone who isn't married, someone who's unattractive, the wallflower and everything. And it is so cliche to have her go through a makeover, and by the end of the book, she's hot now. And so now she can get love. And I hate that because to me, as a reader, I pick up the book because she's an unattractive woman who's trying to find love. And so I had a character who had all of that, and the big ball is coming, and everything is setting up as if she's going to get this grand makeover. Her sister wants to take her under her wing and make her all beautiful. And then basically, instead of what I did was took it and said, this is what actually reality would be, which is in these makeover scenes, it's always like your friend cuts your hair. I'm like, in reality, that's not going to turn out so well. And so basically, she ends up with a horrible butchered haircut because her sister doesn't know how to cut hair. She thinks, oh, just cut some hair, and she ruins it so much that the girl doesn't go to the ball because she's so ashamed of what she looks like. And so it has the exact opposite effect. And in the end, of course, the guy finds her and still says, well, you know, you still look great to me. I still love you. And so it sets it up for, here's this grand romantic moment, and instead I give a different grand romantic moment, and I took the thing I hate, which is the unrealistic expectation that your friend is going to be able to suddenly chop your hair and you're going to be beautiful, and you know, and all you have to do is take off your glasses and suddenly you're hot. Those are all unrealistic, and so I put those in there, and no, she's still unattractive, but he still loves her. So
All right. I love you. I need all your books. Okay. All right. So, okay. I'm sorry, but did anybody else have anything they wanted to say? I just realized, Els, you had a comment though. You were good. You talked. Okay.
I just like to laugh and. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I'm not cutting anybody off if they wanted to say more. All right. So now, along with the making stupid decisions, sometimes you make stupid decisions that actually end up being really good. Like if you watched Melinda Snodgrass's keynote earlier, they had the dumb stick, where you're allowed to hold the dumb stick. Here, I'll use this as my dumb stick. It's a back scratcher. Be like, all right, this is a really dumb idea, but I'm going to say it. And then you have an idea and everyone's like, okay, yeah, that's dumb. But if we did it like this, it would be amazing. And so that's what they did a lot for their TV show scripts. So what are some instances or stories you've heard where someone thought they were making a stupid decision, or maybe their critique partner told them it was a stupid decision and it ended up being really good?
I've got nothing. Every stupid idea I made was actually stupid. It was not brilliant in disguise.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a specific number one. Something stupid I did today is my AirPods are dying. They're almost out of battery. So when I finish speaking, I'm going to try to switch my microphone and headphones, whatever. We'll see if I can pull that off. But I can't think of any specific one, but I know there's plenty of times because I just think for me, words and ideas is just like big old mounds of clay. Like you throw it down and at least you got clay to work with, right? But like the worst thing you can do is not write. So like in fact, I was at a church activity yesterday and a girl came up to me and asked me about writer's block. And she's like, what do you do when you get writer's block? And I was like, this is going to sound really stupid, but it's right. It's like most of the time you have writer's block is because you don't have a good idea. So write the bad idea. You got some idea in your head. It's probably just really dumb. And so you don't want to write it because it's not nearly as good as it should be, or it's not as good as you want it to be, or it's not as good as the rest of the stuff. And it's like, just put something, just unclog the pipes. And when you unclog the pipes, usually what you get at the beginning is a big old like greasy, grimy hairball. But at least the water's flowing now, like at least. So sometimes that's what you need to receive. I know there's a lot of like horrific faces now online. But I think that's what it requires. It requires that at least just slap down that big old thing of clay and then you can start working with it. So don't be like, it's okay to have stupid ideas as long as they don't cripple you, I think. They can slow you down. They can force you to rethink. They can force you to reconsider things. They probably should. But don't let it stop you. That's the only, if it stops the flow of words, I think that's where you get in trouble. But I'm trying to think if there's an example in one of my stories or something where it was a really, really dumb idea. I don't know. I don't really high grade my ideas as far as brilliant or dumb unless it's, well, that's not true. Sometimes I have some stuff that I think is pretty clever, but yeah, I just, when I outline my novels, it is a full on brain vomit. Like I have these, in fact, in this corner over here, I have these giant pieces of paper and their stuff's written upside down. Half of it's in pencil, it's in pen. There's, little doodles. It's just like, and then somewhere in there, if you kind of go cross-eyed, you'll see like, oh, there's a story kind of there. And then you got to twist it upside down and then you start piecing it together. But at the beginning, I let like all ideas flow free, everybody. I am not going to sort of X any idea out before it exists. Because there's plenty of little ugly duckling ideas in there that end up blossoming into something that's pretty cool.
Luckily I've had a little time to think. For me, I get so much of my ideas out in the plotting phase that and I actually don't have critique partners when I'm in that writing phase. So I it's hard to say, bouncing ideas, but I would think that on my first historical romance, I had a lot of critique come back saying that I needed more wrap up, like the couple make up, they kiss, and for me, I'm like, well, they're married, everything's great, it was a marriage of convenience, so I'm like, they're already married, there's nothing really to wrap up, everything's great. But I had a lot of people saying, you need to do more, and I was really irritated because I'm like, this is stupid. I really don't think that there's more to tell in this story because they're married, they're things are good, and so I started just writing a scene, trying to give at least here's a little happy moment while they're having their second honeymoon kind of thing, and the funny thing is as I started writing it, I started unearthing all sorts of other issues that while they do have their happily ever things are good, they want to be in love, but new conflicts and problems. And actually my book that's coming out in April is basically, I took the entire epilogue that I was going to put in my book and instead made it an entire new book where as they are now married, working out some of these issues that they weren't able to resolve, that I didn't realize, oh my gosh, they have all this underlying issues and drama that even though they've decided they want to be together, not everything's perfect. And so I guess that's the closest I can think of something that I thought, writing an epilogue, I don't need an epilogue, it's stupid, I don't need this, but it helped me unearth another book of great information or great story and great conflict. And so yeah, that's about the only thing I can think of.
Okay, I thought of something. Okay, so when I was young and dumb, I decided to write my first novel, and it was the second book in the series. Stupid idea. I put that away and I started on a new book, and I needed a character name, and I just needed a character in this section of my newest book, and it's Thrice Cursed, Thrice Blessed.